I get off just before the Westway and walk down Marylebone Road, still wondering how to pronounce it, towards the old town hall. Fluted two-storey columns, ironwork on the first floor balconies, steps up to the double wooden doors, Victorian Gothic, and don't you just know it? Inside is quiet but serious. Stairs leading up, stairs leading down, doors leading off, doors to corridors, doors to other doors. In the lobby, foyer, hallway, whatever, there's a dark brown wooden table with papers on and a sign on a stand like in a library with a sheet of A4 pointing to where I had to go. It was called the blah blah seminar thing for people, something like that. Can you tell I was thrilled to the very brink of rapture? Can you? I picked up a sheet from the table and walked through a door and down a corridor to another door. I'm pretty sure that was the order. This office stuff was a doddle. The sign on the door said seminar for the bloody blah. My hand went to the handle, one of those old round twisty ones, turned it and went in. The room had a big window on a long table with more papers on and a bunch of losers sitting around it. They looked at me as I came in and I chose a seat halfway up the table towards the window. Nobody said anything. Apparently we were waiting. There was a tea thing on the table. If it was Russia, it'd be called a samovar. It wasn't Russia, so it wasn't a samovar, but I don't know the right word for it. It was a 2-foot high steel cylinder with a black plastic tap at the bottom to draw yourself a cuppa. The design was such that it was impossible to get a cup under the tap unless you tipped the whole thing back at an angle. At this point you found out it was a very, very hot 2-foot high cylinder. There was a little pool of tea around the base, staining the white cloth the thing was on. There was a stack of those National Health white china teacups to one side, no saucers. Box of plastic spoons, sachets of sugar, plate of biscuits. Caddy? Urn? Urn. I looked out the window, nothing happening there. I looked at the other people around the table. Yup, ditto. They looked awful, as most people do when I get this close. Some of them have folders, some have like office clothes on, sensible shoes and careful hair. Seminar chic. What is a seminar anyway? Half an hour? If Demi Moore went to a seminar on mercy, could she expect no quarter? I thought I might write that down. But then the door opened and 2 of the least successful people I'd ever seen came in. This pair of sad clowns went to the head of the table and stood with their backs to the window, so we had to look at them against the light. They probably read that in the Power and Awe seminar handbook for powerfully awesome seminarians. One was 40 and thin and dry and was called Mike, and so was the other one. They introduced themselves with this hilarious joke about Mike 1 and Mike 2 and a mixing desk, which nobody reacted to in the slightest, apart from both mics. Uh-oh, I'm thinking, double act. They paused just too long to disguise their disappointment, grinning desperately into our faces for validation of any sort. When nothing happened, they got their stuff out of their briefcases and one of them put his hand in his pocket while the other one sat down. Upright Mike announced they didn't have time for the usual icebreaker, which I thought was a ship anyway, and started waving his free hand and gushing about the target object items for today and self-facilitating and how to move this on to the next pre-level. I don't know what any of that means. Downright Mike handed out some sort of photocopy with stuff written on it, studied with bullet points. I never read bullet points. Bullet points are for squids. He reads out the stuff on the page anyway. It was more mumbo-jumbo about endogenous acclimatization diameters, micro-macro pico leverage and crypto-topological nanoflation. See above. Everyone else studied the page and looked interested and occasionally looked up at whichever Mike was talking and said, I didn't. I span the paper round in a circle with one hand. It was coloured paper to make the whole thing just so much more exciting. I may have experienced a whole new category of ecstasy around this time. Lower Mike stood up and said he was going to go round the table and we all had to ask him questions about the programme, mostly to show off that he knew the answers. What happened was everybody tried to show off what they were planning to do. mobile reptile coiffeur, quarantine consultant, detox timeshare co-ops, Ponzi pizza parlours. Top Mike was loving the banter, trading chops with the wannabes, which was really just interrupting them, and Bottom Mike was interrupting him and chipping in with his tuppence worth. Whichever one was speaking kept saying things like profit, yeah, or operating deficits, yeah, for no reason. Knob, yeah, for no reason. Some hotshot shithead was telling us how he'd projected a nominal turnover of 50k within the first 6 months. Okay, yeah. And other people were saying, okay, yeah, and nodding. Everyone had pens poised over pads to take notes, although they could have just written utter bollocks and got the whole thing right there. Upstanding Mike actually clapped his hands and announced at this point there would be something called a Quizlet. I wanted to clap my hands around his neck and tell him at this point there would be a homicidalet. Sitting bullshit Mike hands around yet more photocopies, which this time had just numbers on. Numbers for the answers to questions he was going to show us on something called an OHP. What that meant occupied my gigantic curiosity until he told us, like he had a thing for it. Actually, they both told us, overhead projector. Yeah. So vertical M shows us pie charts, breakdowns and analyses he'd drawn in coloured pen on these floppy transparent sheets of plastic and asks us questions about the diagrams and pictures. The answers are written on the transparencies as well, but he reads them anyway. I wondered how much of his fee was for just reading out stuff that was written in front of him and us. He couldn't stop grinning all the time, as chairbound Mike gazed on in rapture. If they'd had a flip chart, I don't think they would have survived the bliss. One of the two stooges begins telling us about the application process for the programme, which inevitably involves more photocopies and umming and yahing. I begin to think about beer and chips. He elaborates on and on about how to write your name on a dotted line, like it's the first time in history this has been attempted. Someone raises their hand and asks him a question, but not before he gets a "just let me finish" in, as if he'd lose his thread if he stopped now. He was leaning on the table with both hands, looking from face to face, nodding to his own pointless points. One word, earnest. Another word, useless cunt. They chewed over the intricacies of filling in a form, pencil or pen, black ink or blue ink, joined up writing or printing, until I wanted to die more than usual. Someone wanted to know if he should use his real address. I couldn't imagine giving more than one answer to this without getting into a fight. Each item, each angle was discussed with the solemnity of a Friday night session at the Pharisee court. Lives so empty as to be filled with nothing so easily. The twin pricks swapped elevations, and the highest one pulled out something from his case and told us we were going to watch a video. This was beyond my capacity to endure. It was bad enough witnessing the dual miscarriage of the Mike's degradation, but please, not a commercial training video, please. Inevitably, the video was a third-generation copy of something else, with crackles and hiss and woofy sound, exactly like a Led Zeppelin studio master, in fact. After the ropey titles written on card and held in front of the camera by someone with Parkinson's, we fade into some witless fuckshite in a suit standing in front of London, saying something like, "Welcome to Training Solutions, tailored to your specific business needs, flexible enough for multi-purpose training specifications. We are in the business of training professionals to tailor your necessities to solve flexibility and multi-need professional business purposes." He was some kind of faded Z-list loser in the only job left to him, a one-time would-be ex-has-been. He had exactly as far to fall as Satan, that bloke from Camus, and me. It occurred to me there was a whole industry of people peddling this sort of drivel to other people who didn't know any better and weren't about to find out through this sort of experience. It's like a government. It's in their interest to keep people stupid, so they believe what they tell them, buy what they sell them, and do what they tell them. But most of all, to maintain their own position of power. KTS. Keep 'em stupid. You heard it here. Get the badge. It's the next big thing. The video. Oh, God, I don't know. This wasn't what Freeze Green had in mind, was it? The suit was in an office now with a Docklands view blowing off about premises or something. I was hoping Bob Hoskins would come in mob-handed and glass him in the tooting. What the hell was I doing there? I'd forgotten if I ever knew. I was a pioneer at the front of irrelevancy. The others were looking at the screen and saying, even though the guy couldn't, hear them or anything. He just kept blathering on about attuning granular edges and sustaining pre-forward competencies and descaling upskill derivatives. Nope, you. One of the mics was glancing back and forth between the TV and the table, smiling as if to say, I'm so proud I showed you this. The video finished and he said, I'm so proud I showed you this, and went into some post-coital spiel about how this would help us with our own plans. By this time, I had indeed formed a business plan, which was to avoid business at any cost if this is what it was like. Je ne suis pas un entrepreneur, je suis un sortipreneur. I flinched as whichever mic asked for our feedback, and people actually started giving it to him. I believe feedback should be confined to Hendrix gigs, so I didn't contribute. The nascent billionaires expressed and gushed and blurted all sorts of shit as if the economy depended on their commitment. And Mike lapped it up with the gusto only the truly unvalidated have in constant reserve, and so did Mike. Everyone was talking about himself, justifying his own existence through the existence of others, and failing to see the abyss at the centre of their construct, a 3D vacuum full of itself. They were comforting each other more than I could console myself, a circle-jerk clusterfuck of reassurance, medium unimportant. I wished my life had a volume control, not volume sound, volume capacity, not to turn down the sound, but to control how much stuff there was. When they talked themselves dry, Mike suggested they try the tea thing. When he tipped it all over himself and began screaming, I took the opportunity and went off to do the 6 bus backwards. Enough.